start. My name is Theresa Fersch. I live in Hollis, New Hampshire with my husband Brian, my dog Jersey, and my 3 chickens. We are very happy there. I work in Bedford, Massachusetts. I am a systems engineer. I hiked the Camino de Santiago just over 3 years ago. To give you a little bit of background, what inspired me to do that, my husband hiked the entire length of the Appalachian Trail in 2014. And he was gone for 6 months, and when he returned, he was like, Theresa, you have to do something like this. You have to do something amazing. And so I sought out my own adventure, and I looked for something that spoke to me the same way the Appalachian Trail spoke to him. And I found out about the Camino, and I did some research, and it really called to me. So it became my way. So I'm going to give you a little presentation about what I experienced. Before we get started, is there anybody here who has hiked the Camino? No? Yes?
I did 100 miles of the Portuguese El Camino.
Fantastic. I want to talk to you later. That's awesome. Is there anybody here tonight who wants to hike the Camino? Oh my God, this is amazing. Okay, fantastic. I'm going to give you all the stories. Okay, so what I'm going to do tonight, I'm going to walk through a typical daily experience on the Camino, just so you can see from day to day what it's like to be a pilgrim, what you're going to encounter throughout your trip. And then I'm going to go through my own personal account. The Camino is a very private experience. It's a very personal journey, and everybody's experience is very different. So there may be some things that if you've done the Camino before, you'll find familiar, and there may be other things that are completely alien to your experience. So let's jump in. I want to start with a little bit of background about what the Camino is, in case you haven't heard of it. The Camino de Santiago is a Christian pilgrimage. It is over 1,000 years old. Popularity has increased and decreased over the centuries, but right now it is the most popular it has ever been. Over 200,000 people hike it every single year. Originally it was a Christian pilgrimage. People did it for spiritual reasons. However, now only about 1/3 of the people who hike the Camino do it for spiritual reasons. Some people just do it for the adventure of it. Some people do it because they're retired and they're looking for something exciting to do. Some people do it because they're at a crossroads in their life and they're looking for answers. And some people are walking in the memory of a loved one. All kinds of reasons to be on the Camino, but you have to know what your reason is at some point. We'll get more into that later. So there are hundreds of routes for the Camino. In the olden days, your Camino began wherever your front door was. You walked out your door and you started pilgrimage. And the end of the pilgrimage always ends in the same place, in the cathedral in Santiago de Compostela, where supposedly the remains of St. James the Apostle lie. And so pilgrims would hike from all over the world to bear witness to that. Now, there are 5 or 6 very popular routes today that most people hike. I hiked the Camino Frances. It begins in France. This is the most popular route, and that's the reason I chose it. It has the most infrastructure along the way, the most places to stop. It's the most supported Camino out there. So here's a map. It's about 500 miles. It begins in a very small town called Saint-Jean in France, and you cross over the border, over the Pyrenees Mountains. You spend a day or 2 in the Pyrenees Mountains. You cross into Spain. The first major city you hit is Pamplona, where they have the running of the bulls every year. And you head west, hitting every single one of these towns. You hit about 5 major cities, lots of rural towns, and you go all the way to Santiago de Compostela. Now, some pilgrims choose to continue on to the coast. That little nub there, there's a small town called Finisterre, which means the world's end. A lot of people choose to go there, and then they also choose to hike to another town called Musia. I took the bus for that section. I felt after I had hiked 500 miles, I didn't need to do any more hiking, and at that point, I just became a tourist. But you can choose to hike that as well. So, people always ask me, how do you prepare for an adventure like this? What do you do? So the first thing I tell people is to just start talking about it. Tell everyone you know and everyone you don't know that you are going to hike the Camino de Santiago. I started talking about the Camino before I even knew what it was. But when you talk about something, you can make it real. All of a sudden, you'll reach this point where you're like, oh God, now I actually have to do it. So just start talking about it. Second, training. Training is extremely important. That said, I did not train. I am an engineer. I sit at my desk 8 to 9 hours a day, and I have a 2-hour commute, so training wasn't really an option for me. I did do one day hike. I put on my pack and I walked around for 14 miles. All that did was give me the confidence to know that I can walk 14 miles at any given time, but it really wasn't training. But this is an important thing to mention because a lot of people think they don't have the ability to hike. They think they're not in shape. They think they're not ready for it. And so I just want to send you the message that anybody can hike the Camino. Anybody can do this. It doesn't matter if you're not in shape. Don't let that stop you. Packing. Packing is extremely important because you're going to carry everything on your back. And so you want to bring everything you need and nothing you don't. There are lots of lists online that can help you. You can talk to other people who have hiked the Camino. There's plenty of advice out there. I was a little overzealous about packing. I started about 6 months early, and I dedicated the bed in our guest room to it. And every time I found a cool little gadget, I'd throw it on the bed. And then right before my trip, I actually had to get more serious and start weeding out the things that I didn't really need. Reservations. So there is a belief on the Camino that because it's a spiritual route, you should not make reservations and that you should just show up in town and have faith that there will be room at the inn. Now, I was not particularly comfortable with that in the beginning. I was going to Europe by myself, country I've never been before, and so I decided, okay, I'm going to make reservations for the first 2 nights. That way I'll feel like I've planned a little bit. So I went online and I found this company, and they said, for about $35, we will pick you up at the Pamplona train station. We will drive you to our pension. We will feed you dinner, give you a bed to sleep in. In the morning, we'll feed you breakfast. And then we will drive you over the border into France and drop you off right at the start of the Camino. Now, this was really convenient because I had no idea what I was going to do once I got to Pamplona. But I was also really nervous because I had no idea who these people were. And so I contacted him and I was like, I've never been there before. How am I supposed to find you? And this is what he sent me. It's a picture with a finger pointing to a park bench and a picture of his head. He didn't give me his name. He didn't give me a phone number. He didn't give me anything. And that was my first lesson of the Camino. The Camino is very simple. It takes all of life and boils it down to the very, very basics. You're only wearing one set of clothes. You're only eating what's on that one menu where you're staying. You're hanging out with those people that you meet for the day. It's very, very simple. And it's very, very sweet. So I did find him. His name was Esteban. His wife was Barbara. And they gave me the perfect start to my Camino.
Where did you fly into?
I flew into Madrid, and then I took a train to Pamplona. And actually, I am available afterwards for questions. I can hang out here as long as you guys want, so rapid fire. Okay, so they say the Camino has 3 stages. They say that the Camino has the power to break down and rebuild your body, your mind, and your soul, and in that order. Now, I had read about this before I left, and to be completely honest, I didn't believe it. I thought it was I thought it was just something people were making up to make the trip sound more special than it actually was. But I actually found this to be 100% true, and I experienced it exactly the way the books described it. It starts at the beginning at the Pyrenees Mountains when you first start hiking, and your body completely falls apart. My body didn't know what I was doing, it didn't like what I was doing, and it resisted every step of the way. My knees hurt, everything was sore. But you just keep walking. And I don't know what happens, but at some point, it's almost like your body starts to understand what you're doing, and it starts cooperating with you, and suddenly all of those aches and pains that you thought were going to hinder you from continuing go away. And all of a sudden, you can just do it, and you don't think about it anymore. And that's when you have time to start reflecting. And that's when your mind starts playing tricks on you. You're walking every day, all day. You have lots of time to think. And that's when you start asking yourself, what am I doing here? What was I thinking? Am I going to make it? What made me think I could come to another country by myself and walk across it? But just like your body falls into line, at some point you get some kind of mental clarity. And all of a sudden, you're like, oh yeah, I know why I'm here. I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to make it. And that's why I was saying, you need to know why you're hiking the Camino, but you don't need to know right away. I didn't even know until I was halfway through the Camino why I was actually there. And then, this is when a lot of pilgrims attest to doing some serious soul searching. And this is why a lot of people choose to hike the Camino. You walk day after day, and you have hours to reflect and think about your life. And a lot of people start asking themselves the very serious questions like, what is my purpose in life? What drives me? What motivates me? What good am I doing for the world? How can I give back more? Am I getting everything out of the world that I wanted? And that's a very powerful experience to a lot of pilgrims. And I have to say, in my experience, a lot of people come back from the Camino and make major life changes because of the realizations they have on the Camino. Okay, so after that, we're going to go into something a little bit lighter. All right, so let's talk about the average day on the Camino for all of you who plan on doing this at some point. This is going to be your general experience. So to start out in the morning, you stay in places called albergues. These are hostels that are specifically and only for pilgrims. When you first start hiking the Camino, you get a little accordion-style booklet, and you get stamped every time you stop somewhere. And this is called your Camino passport, or your credentials. That passport is what grants you access to the albergues, because it is proof that you are a pilgrim and that you are hiking the pilgrimage. So you stay in albergues. They cost anywhere between $5 and $8 a night, so very cheap. And they give you a shower. Sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's not. And they give you a somewhat decent bed to sleep in. I'll go into more detail about that. And then in the morning, you wake up. You usually wake up fairly early, sometimes 6 a.m., sometimes earlier, sometimes later, depending on the condition you're in and how much hiking you're planning on doing. And the very first thing you want to do is eat. So I am going to talk about food a lot. Food is very, very important when you're long distance hiking. So tostadas y café con leche are the most popular things to eat. I don't know if this is just on the Camino or if this is a Spanish thing, but I found that the food was very sparse in the morning. You did not get a lot for breakfast. You'd get a piece of dry bread. If you were lucky, you'd get some jelly to put on it, and that was about it. My first morning, my first breakfast on the Camino, we were all sitting family style, and they were passing around a bowl of bread, and I scarfed down my bread and passed on the bowl, and I was just sitting there, and they were like, go. And I was like, no, where's the rest of my breakfast? And they were like, that was breakfast, go. So I had to walk with just that. Café con leche, coffee with milk, that's what it means. But it is not actually coffee with milk. Those are actually double shots of espresso. And I was downing those things all day long, not realizing the amount of caffeine I was consuming. But it was okay, because you need that much energy anyway. This is tortilla. This is a very popular dish in Spain. It's potato and egg. Tastes absolutely amazing the first 100 times you eat it. But after that, you get a little tired of it. And then down here, I don't know if it was just the time of year that I was there, but I had freshly squeezed orange juice every morning. So good.
What time of the year did you travel?
May and June.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and then you start walking. So you get a little bit of food in you, and you start walking. And this is your day. The Camino is all about walking. And you can't really see it very well here, but we actually saw double rainbows that day. You were outside in nature all day long. You are subjected to the elements, good or bad, and you just walk. And you walk through rural areas, you walk through cities, wheat fields, vineyards, quarries, you walk by highways, you walk by everything, because you were crossing almost all of Spain. There's also a lot of architecture and infrastructure in Spain. The Romans, of course, loved to leave their footprints everywhere, and they were all over Spain. There were lots of Roman bridges on the Camino. This was my favorite bridge because it was so impressive and so long. The gentleman who took this picture was complaining to me because he could not fit the entire bridge into the picture. You also walk through little towns. Similar to the Appalachian Trail, they have trail towns on the Camino. Those are towns that are there specifically because of the Camino, and there really wouldn't be a town there if the Camino didn't pass through it. So I believe that's what this particular town was. This was at the top of a mountain that we got to once, and that was the extent of the town. There was a place to sleep, there was a little gift shop, and a little restaurant, and that was it. So then you need second breakfast. After you walked about 5 or 10 kilometers, you are already hungry because the bread doesn't hold you over for long. So you stop again. Usually at this point, more restaurants and stores are open. That is me very excited because I am eating a chocolate stuffed croissant with chocolate sprinkles. But a lot of times, you'll sit outside. This is me with my trail family at second breakfast. Those red chairs, those are going to be the most exciting thing you guys see in Spain. Because when you see those chairs off in the distance, you know that you have rest and food and drink coming your way. They come in red and green and sometimes blue. But on this particular morning, it was so amazing because my trail family was having second breakfast. And I just went off in the field, I laid down, and I took a nap. I slept for about a half an hour, and then they came by, woke me up, said they were leaving, and we just headed off. And there was something so peaceful and so freeing about that. I cannot just take a nap in the middle of the day when I feel like it now. But when I was on the Camino, I could totally do that. You are only responsible for yourself, and you are responsible for taking care of yourself and getting through this journey, and that is your main goal. And then more walking. Like I said, you go through lots of wheat fields. This was just my friend and I pretending to swim through the wheat fields. The locals. The locals are amazing people. So you have to think, over 200,000 people walk past these people's front yard every single year. And some of them are disgruntled. Some of them don't want anything to do with pilgrims, and you'll know who they are, and you just stay out of their way. You're in their territory after all. But most of them have such a deep respect and appreciation for the Camino. And many of them are pilgrims themselves. And so you'll meet these people. And on this particular day, I was almost to Sarria. So I was about 60 miles out from Santiago. And there was this older gentleman pruning his flowers. And he called me over. And he asked in Spanish if when I reached Santiago, if I would make a donation in his name. And he gave me flowers and he gave me a walnut. And I was like, wow, how amazing is this guy that he sees strangers walking past his yard and trampling on his flowers 200,000 times a year. And he's still kind and genuine and sweet. And I just thought that was so amazing. It also made me wonder how many women he picked flowers for. So I believe that one of the biggest reasons the majority of pilgrims return to the Camino over and over and over again is because it is the most loving and supporting community I've ever seen in my life. There is genuine kindness on the Camino. I will show you some examples of the support that the people offer. Everybody's on their best behavior. Everybody has good intentions, and it's very supportive. Even the graffiti was warm and welcoming, and you'd see signs that were like, you can do it, don't stop, keep going, fella. It was just all very supportive and encouraging. Everybody has a similar goal, to get to Santiago, and so they will do anything they can to help you get there.
Is the trail well marked?
Yes, I will go into that. Okay. So, then you want to go to church. So, there are churches all over Spain. They love their churches, and of course this is a spiritual route, so a lot of people choose to go to the churches. Now, even if you are not a spiritual person or a religious person, I highly recommend stopping in the churches. First of all, physically, they are very comforting. They are cool, they are dark, they're a nice place to rest and relax after you've been outside all day. They're also absolutely astounding. The architecture is amazing. And the thing that I thought was really interesting about these churches is even though you're a pilgrim and you're smelly and you're dressed all funky and you've got all your gear on your back, they are still very welcoming. They don't bat an eye when you come in, and you're welcome to come in and pray and meditate or do whatever it is you need to do. This is a cathedral in Burgos. This is considered the most beautiful cathedral on the Camino, and I absolutely agree. It is also enormous. There are over 20 chapels inside, and they were all made by different engineers, artists, and architects. And you could see the artwork changing over the centuries, going to each chapel. I mean, it's astounding. And then more walking. That's what you do all day. To answer your question, the Camino is pretty well marked. This is generally what the Camino looks like. You're usually walking along a defined path. Sometimes it's a dirt road, sometimes it's an asphalt road, sometimes it's a little path through a vineyard. Usually it's pretty well marked. They have different kinds of markers. And the only time I really got lost, there were a couple tricky places. Generally in the cities because there are a lot of distractions and sometimes it's hard to find the markers. But here's the thing. Everybody knows why you're on the Camino. They know that you're a pilgrim just by looking at you. So if you just stand there looking kind of lost for a second, people will just go like this. Like they know why you're there. So I never felt like I was lost.
Does everybody speak English?
Most people speak English, yes. If you don't speak Spanish, that is okay. First of all, the universal language, we are very fortunate, is English. And so most people speak English. You will meet people who speak Spanish who can translate for you. And also, the Camino crosses through 3 different languages. What? 4. You've got French, Basque, Spanish, and Galician. So even if you don't speak Spanish, it's okay, because it's only useful through part of the Camino anyway. So this was just one of the breaks my trail family and I took. I like this picture because on the left we had wheat fields and on the right we had vineyards. And that's pretty much all you do in Spain is eat bread and drink wine. So that also was the point when I realized why wine is cheaper in Spain than water, because I walked through literally hundreds of miles of vineyards. So then you go to the bar. The bars. The bars are what keep you going on the Camino. They're not really bars. They're usually cute little cafes. Sometimes they're indoors. Sometimes they're just food trucks on the side. But they're all unique, and every experience you have with the locals is charming and unique. On this particular day, that was my trail family and I. We were sitting there having juice and just refreshing ourselves. And the gentleman working there called me over, and he asked me if I had a mother. And I was like, yes, of course I have a mother. And he asked me to hold out my hand. And he gave me a necklace, and he said, give this to your mother, it's been blessed. And he was giving out hundreds of necklaces to all the women who walked in. And there's just so many unique experiences like that. And then sometimes you're walking all day, and there might not be a lot of towns, and might not be a lot of restaurants, but the people in Spain know why you're there, and they know exactly what you need and when you need it. So there's always a convenient food truck located somewhere. And so on this particular day, there was really nowhere to go except for this food truck. So we bought some peanuts and beer, and we plopped ourselves down in the grass and had a good old picnic. It was great. Oh, and you will never see pilgrims run like you'll see when they spray paint the word bar on the asphalt. Animals. If you like animals, you will love the Camino. The Camino is peppered with animals, both domestic, livestock, and feral. There were some books originally written about the Camino. There are many more books now, but not very long ago there were only a few books about the Camino, and one of them talked about the vicious wild dogs, and every time I gave a talk, somebody would say, what about the vicious wild dogs? So I had to put this slide in here. That is a vicious wild dog, and that is a vicious feral cat. The animals know you have food, and they're very loving, and they just want your food. So there's really nothing to worry about. So this picture was actually taken on, I think, day 6. I'll go into more detail about my experience, but on this particular day, I was really struggling. And I have to tell you, one of the most amazing things about the Camino is that you feel like you accomplished something huge every single day. So I was really struggling that day, and you can see in the foreground it's kind of dark. And I was hot, I was sweaty, I had a headache, my feet hurt, I was feeling sorry for myself. And all of a sudden, off in the distance, the clouds parted, and I could see my destination on the horizon. And I was like, I am a rock star! And it was the greatest feeling ever, every day. Every day. So then you have to find a bed. Like I said, you stay in albergues. They're usually pretty easy to find. They have big signs, and they know exactly where you need them, so they're easy to find.
How many miles are you doing a day?
It all depends. It's whatever you feel like you can do. Some people do 3 or 4. Some people do 30 or 40. It all depends.
What were you averaging?
I did between 12 and 18 miles a day. Okay, so the albergues, they're all very unique. They're all very special in their own way. On this particular day, I was hiking with my 2 trail friends, and when we got there, we were like, there are 3 of us. We need 3 beds. And they were like, we have 3 beds up in the attic. And so we went upstairs, and there were these 3 mattresses on the floor. That is a giant hole that goes out to the roof, wide open. But this was my favorite place to stay on the entire Camino because I only had to share a room with 2 people who I already knew. And that is extremely rare on the Camino and a very special treat. Generally on the Camino, you stay in dormitory-style rooms. They have bunks like this, and you will share a room with 8 or 10 people, up to... The monastery in Roncesvalles held 500 people, so a lot of people. So you can't see it, but in this picture, a lot of times they'll build partitions, and so you'll be in a little quad. So that gives you a little bit of privacy, just you and your trail family, but it doesn't protect you from snoring, it doesn't protect you from farting, it doesn't protect you from people talking in their sleep. So bring earplugs, you're gonna need them. You will learn to sleep in this environment. I found it a little stressful at first, but on the 4th day, I passed out from sheer exhaustion, and I never had trouble sleeping again. Also, I wanna point out, by the time you get to where you're going at the end of the day, you know the majority of people because you've been running into them on the trail the whole day. So by the time you see them at night, you're actually excited to see them, and by the end of your Camino, you're thrilled to see everybody at the end of the day, and you have no problem sharing these large spaces with these people who you now consider family. So then you have some chores to do. You have to do your laundry and you have to shower. Because you're not carrying a lot of clothes, you have to do laundry fairly frequently. So sometimes albergues will have washers and dryers. They will charge you more for the washer and dryer than they will for the bed, and you will gladly pay it. Because if you don't do that, you're going to have to hand wash your clothes, which means you have to find a dirty, dingy sink somewhere. You have to hand wash them, and then you have to wring them out well enough so that they'll be dry in the morning. Otherwise, you tie them to your pack and let them dry in the sun the next day, which I had to do on more than one occasion. You also have to shower. People always get nervous about the showers. The showers are not that bad. Some places charge you for the shower, but most places don't. Sometimes you have hot water, sometimes you don't, but at the end of the day, you just want to get clean. You don't really care. So it's really not a bad experience. And then you have to find dinner, because even though you've been eating all day, you're still hungry. So depending on how hard you hike and how long you hike, an average long-distance hiker can burn anywhere from 500 to 8,000 calories a day. So you cannot possibly eat enough. They call it hiker hunger, when you're always hungry no matter what you do. So by dinner time, you're still hungry. Sometimes they have pilgrim meal, they serve family style, like this pilgrim meal up here. I love this picture because after that night I met every single person in that picture. So that's always a lot of fun. But sometimes at the end of the day, you might have, if you're like me, you might have been socializing all day long and you might want some time to yourself. Or you might be in a town that's so small they don't have restaurants. So in that case, you just go to the supermercado, you pick up some random items like artichoke hearts and apples and potato chips, and you just eat whatever's there. Some of the albergues have kitchen supplies, and you can make dinner there. This is what I asked for when I asked for a hamburger on the Camino. It was just 2 plain beef patties, 2 eggs, and some undercooked fries. I put that in there, though, to remind me to tell you that you're in another country and things are not going to be what you expect sometimes, and you just have to roll with it. It's just part of the experience. So then you visit with your trail family. So I've mentioned trail family a few times. Trail families are something that my husband experienced when he was on the Appalachian Trail, and he talked about how important his trail family was. And I learned that it is extremely important. There's a reason they call them family. The people you spend all your time with dictate the type of experience you're going to have. So it is extremely important that you spend your time with people you like, people who like you, people who are good, people who make you feel good, people who inspire you. But you don't have to worry about it because it happens very organically. When you're hiking throughout the day, you run into the same people all the time, and you're walking fast, then you're walking slow, you're taking breaks, you're running into each other, and you see these people all day long. And then eventually at some point you start to click with certain people, and then you start walking with them. And then something happens, and all of a sudden these people become very important to you. So I met a wonderful couple, a mother and son from Florida, and I fell absolutely in love with them. And we hiked together for over a week. And it was just such a wonderful experience to be with them every day and every night. So trail families are extremely important, and one of the best things to do at the end of the day is to hang out with your trail family, and what I call my extended trail family. Those are the other people that are on the outside. On this particular day, it's really funny because when people come from all over the world to hike the Camino, so there are languages from all over the world, and you never know what language is going to dominate at dinner. So on this particular day, I totally lost out because the 2 women were from Austria, the 2 men were from Germany, and so they were talking in German all night. But it was fine. I had no idea what was going on, but I just sat there and drank my wine and got drunk slowly and enjoyed the international experience. It was great. We had a really good time. This is more visiting with trail family, hanging out. There's a lot of wine. There's a reason they call it the wine trail. I love this picture because you do not have to hike the Camino the way I did. You do not have to put a pack on your back and just head to another country and start walking. They actually have tour groups that can help you with this to make it easier. And the tour groups offer all kinds of services. This particular group of people were on a tour, and I found out that their tour group, not only did they ship their luggage to each location so they didn't have to carry it, but if they got injured halfway through the day or they just got tired and didn't want to walk anymore, they'd call them up and the tour group would pick them up and bring them to their destination. Now I have to admit, and I talk about this extensively in my book, I did not think that was fair, and I did not like that. I didn't think it was fair that these people were getting credit for the same trip I was taking. But eventually I got over myself and I realized that the Camino is an amazing experience and everybody should have access to it. And if a tour group is what makes you comfortable and if that's what you need, then that's absolutely what you should do. And that's another reason why it doesn't matter what your abilities are. You can still hike the Camino because there are lots of people who are willing to help you do that for the right amount of money. And then you journal. So journaling. At the end of the day, there's always this period of time where everybody is journaling. They're sitting down and they're writing in their notebooks or they're thumbing away on their cell phones, but lots of people journal. Now, I did not plan on journaling. The only reason I did is because I promised my mom I would stay in touch and let her know that I was alive every single day. So my husband said, well, why don't you start a blog? And I'm like, I don't even know what a blog is. So I set up a website and I started a blog. And when I wrote my blog every single day, I thought of it as a private letter that I was sending to my family at home. And I included all of my deepest, darkest secrets, everything I was experiencing while I was on the Camino. What I didn't know was that I actually had hundreds of readers. So it kind of spread like wildfire. But the great part of that is I found out that journaling was actually a critical part of my experience because it allowed me to reflect every day on everything that happened. And I wrote down little bitty details like the type of flowers I was passing. And now I have this amazing memory and I will never lose it. And when I am 90 years old, God willing, I might not be able to remember those details, but I'll be able to read about it. So I highly recommend journaling. And then you go to bed fairly early, usually around 9 o'clock, sometimes earlier. One town I got into, that little town that was on top of the mountain I told you about, everybody was asleep by 8 p.m. because it was a hard hike up. They call it hiker midnight when everybody goes to bed super early. All right, so I'm going to walk through my personal experience on the Camino because like I said, this is a very private journey. It's a very personal experience, and everybody's experience is different. So I really can only speak to what I went through. So, day one, I was excited, naive, and soaking wet. I started in St. Jean, like I said, and it was pouring down rain. It was about 40-some degrees. It didn't start raining until a little bit later, so you can see a couple pictures here. So to back up a little bit, I met my first hiking partner before I even left the country. I met her in the Boston Logan Airport on the way to Madrid. Her name was Melissa. She lives in Austin, Texas, and she had a layover in Boston. But we had our own journeys once we got to Spain, so we separated. But then, the very first morning when Esteban dropped me off in St. Jean, I ran into Melissa. So we were like, let's hike together. So the first thing we did was we went to the Pilgrim's office, and that's where we got our credentials, our little booklet. And then we went to the pharmacy. Pharmacies are like candy stores to hikers because you're always injured and you always need something. But they know that on the Camino, so there are pharmacies everywhere. So you don't have to worry about carrying lots of supplies. You carry a few things, but for the most part, you can find what you need on the Camino. And then we went to the grocery store to pick up snacks. Even though there's lots of food along the way, you always want snacks on you. I always made sure I had a block of cheese in my pocket. The animals loved that too. And then we started hiking. So the Pyrenees Mountains. It is very unfortunate that the hardest part of the Camino also happens to be the very start of the Camino, because this is when you were the least conditioned. The Pyrenees Mountains are absolutely gorgeous. I went over in 2 days. So the Pilgrim's Office told us that we should not hike over the Pyrenees Mountains. There are a couple routes you can take. They said, don't take the Napoleon route, the one that goes right up and over, because the weather is really, really bad. Well, the weather was so bad that we never saw the other route, and we went right up and over. But we were okay, but it was very cold, and it was very rainy, and by the time we arrived at our albergue that night, we were soaked through, and even though we were sweating and shivering at the same time, it was an interesting experience. This was the only picture I got of the Pyrenees Mountains because the weather was so foggy. So I do need to go back one day because it's absolutely beautiful. And you could hear bells on the sheep and the cattle all over the mountain, and they would echo off the mountains. It was wonderful. And on day 2, at some point in time, we crossed into Spain. I don't know when that happened. If there was an España sign, we missed it because of all the fog. But we stopped to celebrate at this spot. We looked around and we were like, this looks a lot like Spain. I think we're in Spain. But we really had no idea. But that was the moment we celebrated. So day 3, families are formed and bodies are broken. This is when everybody starts working hard and playing hard. This is a critical time in your hike because this is when your body really starts to resist and it starts to break down, and you have to pay very close attention to what your body is telling you. Are you just having aches and pains because your body's having trouble, or do you have a serious condition that you need to address? So it was really funny that particular night. I was a total wreck. My hiking partners were a total wreck. These were my hiking partners at the time, Melissa and Christina. Christina lives in Switzerland. We were all struggling, and we were sitting there, and this very young, very fit gentleman walks in. He's got his hiking poles, and he walks to the top of the steps, and he looks down the steps, and he looks like he's going to cry because he has to go down the steps, and he has no more energy. And he sat on the steps and did not move. And everybody felt for him when he walked in the door because they all knew we were all going through it. We all felt like we were falling apart. But if you look at the picture, it doesn't look like it because we're meeting people from all over the world, we're drinking local wine, we're having a blast. So it's interesting. You've got 2 things going on at the same time. It's the best time and the worst time at the same time. So then we crossed into Pamplona. This is where they have the running of the bulls every year. This is the 3rd largest bull ring in the world. Pamplona is an awesome town. It's surrounded by walls, and there aren't a whole lot of cars on the inside, and you can walk all over. Bullfighting is a very big part of their culture there. I was not a fan. I think it's horrible, but it is very much in your face. You could tell it is definitely their main source of revenue in Pamplona, so they celebrate it very hard. So then a couple days later, my hiking partner and I started first thing in the morning so that we could watch the sunrise at the top of this hill. This is the Alto del Perdón. This is a very popular milestone along the way. If you saw the movie The Way, there's a scene where they walk past this. That's where they realized that you can actually do the Camino on a bike, and they're wondering why they're walking it. So you do see lots of people on bicycles on the Camino. I think they finish it in about a week. They're moving much faster. Also very, very hardcore people. Yeah, it's just really hard to jump with a pack on, so I had to get a picture of that. So day 7. So I wrote here, decide to walk alone. Nobody decides to walk alone. I didn't decide to walk alone, but what was happening was I was walking with Melissa. We had been together for an entire week. At this point, we felt like sisters. We were very close. But we had very different agendas. We had very different abilities. Melissa only had 2 weeks to complete as much of the Camino as she could, and I had more time than that. Melissa was strong and powerful and never needed to stop, and I felt like a horse that needed to be put down. So I was struggling, and I realized at this point that if I continued to keep up with Melissa, I was probably going to seriously injure myself, and then I wouldn't be able to complete my trip. So there's a very serious saying about hiking, and it is that you must hike your own hike. That is extremely important, and I cannot stress that enough. I learned that one weekend, and I'm so glad I learned it when I did. My Camino completely changed once I made that perception change. So I said goodbye to Melissa that day, and that was a very sad day. It was a very sad goodbye, but we had to, and we knew we had to. But there's another saying on the Camino that you're never alone. And that same day, I ran into these two awesome guys who I had met my first day in France, and we hung out every subsequent night. We'd have dinner and we'd have drinks. And so on this particular day, we decided to start walking together. And it worked out really well. I didn't like being alone in towns, and I asked them, I told them, I said, look, I walk really slow. I have very short legs, and I have chronic foot pain. And I said, can we just meet in the towns at the end of the day? And they were like, no, we can walk together. Well, it worked out really well because unlike Melissa, who was on a mission, these guys were in no hurry. And they stopped at every single bar along the way, which gave me time to rest my poor feet. So it worked out really well. And that's when my Camino really started to change. This right here, this is a wine fountain. It is free wine that pours, compliments of the monks at the monastery. So I brought a special sippy cup just for that event, because I knew it was coming, and I strapped it to my chest so I could drink it throughout the day. So this was when my experience really started to change. I was still having problems. I was still in a lot of pain. My feet were hurting really bad. And when we were walking, at one point, I started getting this sharp pain that was going up my leg. And I took about 3 steps, and I couldn't go anymore. And I just stopped, and I was leaning over my poles trying to take some relief off my feet. And I must have looked so pathetic because my hiking partners just looked at me. And I so appreciated how they handled it. They didn't say a word. They didn't ask me if I needed help. They didn't make me feel bad. They just stopped. They took in the views, and they gave me time to compose myself and to feel better. Well, my friend Steven walked up over a hill, and he came back, and he was like, Theresa, you got to come see this. And I was like, no way. If it's not on the way to my bed, I'm not going because I don't have any extra energy to spare today. And he said, please trust me. So I walked with him. The 3 of us walked over this hill, and we saw a poppy field as far as the eye could see. And it was totally a scene out of The Wizard of Oz. We frolicked, we laid in the grass, we took a nap for an hour. It was amazing. But the point here is that you can't always plan for things, and things may not always end up the way you want. And I was in so much pain, but if I hadn't had that mysterious pain at that moment, I never would have seen this view. And none of the other pilgrims saw this. Now, granted, there are other poppy fields along the way, but none of them looked like this one. And there's just lots of fun and silliness throughout the day. You have to imagine you are outside every single day. You are out in the sunshine all day, every day. You're exercising, you're hanging out with fun-loving people, your endorphins are thriving. You just feel really good. So notice this picture, notice the age difference. The youngest person in this picture is 15, and the oldest person is in his late 70s. People of all ages hike the Camino. Yeah, and it's funny because I felt like the majority of people were retirement age, but I also think that had to do with with how fast I was walking. Because on the days that I was able to walk faster, I met younger people. So I think that dictates who you're going to meet, depending on how fast you're going. So even though I'm having a blast, I made a mistake with the type of socks I was wearing, and I started having blisters. But it took me about 2 weeks to figure out what my problem was. My hiking partner, Steven, was a paramedic, and so he would help suture up my blisters. There is a ton of advice out there about how to handle blisters, and I'm not going to go into it tonight because everybody is adamant that they know the answer. I also feel the same way. I feel I learned from experience. But what I will tell you is if you're going to hike the Camino, listen to what wilderness first aid responders tell you. They're the ones that understand what it is like to treat a blister when you have continued trauma day after day after day. That kind of treatment is very different from blisters on somebody who's going to sit and rest all day. So listen to wilderness first aid responders. They're the only ones that know what they're talking about. Day 11, I walked my first 30-kilometer day, which is about 18 miles. The only thing that was significant about that is it was the first time that I really felt good about what I was doing, and I realized I was actually going to make it. So I was very excited about that. This was my trail family and I. This was after Melissa and I separated. This is Ginger and Drennan, the mother-daughter team, mother-son team that I met. This is Maria she's Mexican, but I think she lived in Texas. And this is Nikolai, who lives in Germany. We were just hanging out at a food truck in the middle of a vineyard, having a good time. And then down here, this was really cool, and I already emphasized this point, but just how simple and freeing the Camino is. We were walking along this dusty trail, and all of a sudden I realized I was hungry, and I was like, "Are you hungry?" And he was like, "I'm always hungry." And so we just got off the side of the road. I popped open my umbrella. I had cheese, he had bread. It was the perfect meal. And we just sat there and ate until we were done, and then we got up and kept walking. No planning, very, very simple. So you see lots of unique experiences on the Camino. This was one of my favorite moments. We were walking and we literally got pushed off the road by hundreds of sheep. And there's a cute little shepherd. It was awesome. So I loved the dogs. The dogs were extremely skilled. I saw herding dogs do things that I didn't know dogs could do. These dogs were really cool. I loved this dog here. This dog stood between us and the sheep and did not move until all the sheep had passed. And then there was another one that was herding them from the other direction. It was really impressive. And this is the Camino. Those are my trail family right behind us, coming up. But that's generally what the path will look like. All right, so that goes on for a while. I'm going to jump past that. So, when my husband hiked the Appalachian Trail, I was the loving, doting, supportive wife. I was 100% supportive. I continued to work. I paid the bills. I sent him trail packages along the way. I would occasionally fly down to a trail town and meet him for the weekend. But I did not get it. I didn't understand why he was putting himself through that. And he would call me, and he would be in the hospital because something happened, or his friend broke an arm, or there was always something going on. There were always blisters and this and that. And I was like, is your life so boring that you have to create challenges for yourself? But I realized when I was on the Camino that the answer to that question is yes. So few people in our modern day life have the opportunity to truly push themselves. So few people have the opportunity to do something extraordinary. But when you do extraordinary things, when you push yourself to do those crazy things that you hear people doing, and you have to pull out all of your strength and all of your courage and all of your conviction to conquer some challenge that you put before you, no matter how ridiculous it may seem, you reach a level of self-awareness that is unattainable any other way. And that's why people do crazy things. That's why people hike Kilimanjaro. That's why people bear children. That's why people fight wars. And that's not to compare those things, but the commonality that all those things have is that the people who do those things find out who they are and what they're capable of. And when you meet yourself, it is a very empowering experience. And I found myself, when I was on the Camino, it was the first time I ever truly challenged myself to do something that I didn't think I could do. And I realized I could do it. And it was an amazing experience. And that is my message to you tonight. If there is something in your mind, anything, it doesn't have to be hiking. If there is something in your mind that you've always thought of doing, go for it. There's a saying out there, and I love it. It's the only reason it's impossible is because you haven't done it yet. And that sounded really cheesy to me before I hiked the Camino, but now that speaks volumes to me, because now I realize you really can do anything. And the only reason you feel like you can't do it is just because you haven't done it yet. I didn't think I could hike 500 miles across Spain by myself, but I did. I didn't think I could write a book, but I did. I didn't think I could be a public speaker, but I am. So now I have all these examples to myself, and now whenever I push myself, which I do regularly now, I realize that I can do these things. And so that's the message I want to send to you. If you have something in your life that you've always wanted to do, go for it. So, this is the meseta, the dreaded meseta. Meseta means plateau, and that is exactly what it is. It is a long, flat piece of land in the middle of Spain, and you can see from this picture it goes on for miles. It is days worth of hiking. A lot of people dread the meseta for multiple reasons. One, there aren't very many places to stop. Two, there's very little protection from the sun. And some people find it very boring. But I actually found this to be a very important part of my Camino. This is where I had to push myself when I was in the middle of nowhere, and my only choice was to keep going. It's also a wonderful time to reflect. This is when people start doing soul searching. This is when people find themselves. So I would strongly recommend that you push through the meseta, because a lot of people choose to skip it. Day 20. So I hit rock bottom. And I was having all these amazing realizations about myself, and I was having an amazing time, and I had all these wonderful friends, and I was outside and loving it, but I was still having problems with my feet. And on one particular day, I was really struggling. And this was halfway through the day, I stopped, and I was at one of the stops, and I propped my feet up on the big red chairs. It's totally normal out there. It's blister season all year round on the Camino. You'll see feet all over the place. But I was having problems with my feet, and this German fellow came up, and he was like, "Oh, you need aloe." And I was like, "That's great, but I don't have any aloe." And he pulled a plant out of his pocket. And so I didn't speak German, and he didn't speak English very well, so he and my German hiking partner started to go to town, and they were working and talking, and I had no idea what they were doing, but all I could do was watch in amazement as these two people who owe me absolutely nothing worked so hard to make me feel better. So afterwards, my hiking partner was like, "Okay, here's what we did." And he explained everything they did and what I was supposed to do and how I was supposed to take care of it. It was actually terrible advice. It was wildly creative and much appreciated, but it was very bad advice. So by the time I got to my destination that evening, my feet were in really bad shape. And I was sitting on my bed, and I unwrapped my feet. And I was like, "Oh my God, this is really bad. I'm gonna need a doctor." And one of my hiking friends found a doctor for me who was available, and I went to the doctor and I got fixed up. He bandaged up my feet. You can't really see it. I had 2 massive blisters right between my big toes that wrapped around to the balls of my feet. They were huge. And he was like, "They're going to get infected. And once they get infected, there's nothing you can do. You can't walk on infected feet." And I had lost a lot of friends to infections, so I knew I had to stop. He said no walking for 3 days, and I was devastated. I was walking every day for 20 days, and suddenly he was like, "Don't walk." And I knew all of my friends were going to carry on without me, because when you get sick or you get injured, you stay behind. People keep going. So I was very upset about that. That wasn't enough. I woke up in the middle of the night with the worst stomach bug ever and was running to and from the bathroom all night long. Bring your own roll of toilet paper, just so you know. Yeah, so when I woke up in the morning, all my friends moved on at 6:30 in the morning, but I was still stuck in my albergue. I was very fortunate. I was actually staying in a convent, and they were nuns. Now, generally, albergues kick you out first thing in the morning because they have to prepare for the next wave of pilgrims. But because I was in a convent and they were nuns, they were very nice to me. I told them I was sick, and they said I could stay as long as I wanted. At least that was how I interpreted it. So I stayed there. There was another gentleman in the bed next to me. He was also sick as a dog and did not stir in the morning. But I have to emphasize this experience, because while this was the low point on my Camino, this was also a highlight. And this is a great example of the loving and supportive environment that I was telling you about. So this gentleman here, his name is Marco. Never met him before. I saw him the night before. We had dinner at the same table, and that was it. Marco found out that the guy next to me and I were sick, and he stayed behind. Even though he was perfectly healthy, he stayed behind. And every few hours, he would wake us and force us to drink fluids. And then at one point, he woke me up, and he said, "Are you strong enough to walk?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I need you to get your things." So I started putting my things away, and I was like, "Oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do." I didn't know what town I was in. I didn't know what albergue I was in, because I was such a mess when I arrived at town the night before. All my friends had moved on without me. I had no idea what I was going to do. I was completely helpless at that point. And Marco picked up my stuff and said, "Follow me." And so I didn't have a choice but to follow this complete stranger. So I walked through the streets of this little town with him. And what I didn't know is that while I was sick and sleeping in bed, Marco took it upon himself to find a very nice hostel and reserved a room for me and a room for the other guy. And he got me checked in. And when I got there, he had drinks, he had food, and he had a map where he drew all the things that a pilgrim would need in town, like the ATM, the bus station, the supermarket. And that was the biggest act of kindness I've ever experienced in my life. I was so vulnerable at that point, and God only knows what could have happened to me. I had no idea how to take care of myself, and this complete stranger took it upon himself to take care of me. And once I was settled in, he gave me a hug, wished me a buen camino, and I never saw him again. cool. So I did get better. I rested for 3 days. I did get better. The stomach bug went away within 24 hours. It was just some weird thing that we were passing around. That went away. And I took a taxi to the next large city, and my hiking partner actually was waiting for me there. So I didn't lose all of my friends. So day 24, I found myself and I found my groove. I figured out what I was doing wrong with my feet. I didn't have any more pain. I could walk all day, every day, didn't feel anything. I knew why I was on the Camino. I was having all these amazing experiences, and all of a sudden my adventure went from just being an exciting vacation in Europe to being this incredibly powerful, spiritual experience. So this is the Cruz de Ferro. This is also another highlight on the Camino. Note the millions of rocks. Pilgrims bring rocks from all over the world to leave at this one location. The rocks are meant to represent a sin or a prayer, and leaving behind the rock at this location represents leaving behind the weight of your sins and your prayers. So a lot of people find this very spiritual. It's a very empowering moment. That said, I carried my rock 300 miles at this point and lost it. So I was pretty mad, but I was like, that's fine. This is just, it's symbolic. I'll find another rock. So I started to walk back on this path. There was not a single rock or loose pebble for 200 meters, because apparently I wasn't the only one who lost my rock. So I picked up this little, it was probably dust, and I flicked it into the pile, and I was like, there you go. I did find my rock at the next stop. It was in a pocket I forgot to check, so I ended up giving it to a friend of mine at work. He asked me to bring back a rock from Spain, and I was like, here's my sin rock. Camino angels. So we live near the Appalachian Trail. You might have heard of trail angels. Angels are people who, at their own free will, give free food, clothing, water, shelter, whatever a hiker may need. There are lots of Camino angels on the trail. This particular Camino angel was actually a homeless gentleman who has lived in this dirt field for 6 years, and he has dedicated his life to giving pilgrims whatever they need. So he built this little thing for us to sit on. There was nowhere to sit for 20 miles except for that one spot. And he had this cart that he made, and it was full of watermelon and avocados and oranges and juice. And it's the most amazing thing in the world when you're working so hard to do something and a complete stranger is like, here, this is just what you need to keep going. So lots of Camino angels. On day 28, my husband joined me on the Camino. So the last 60 miles of the Camino was considered the official Camino that you need to get credit for hiking the Camino. So it gets very, very busy at that point. So my husband joined me. He actually joined me 100 miles before because I was walking so slow. By the time he got there, I was still way back. So we walked about 100 miles together. But it was interesting because when Brian joined me, he had just spent 7 months hiking the Appalachian Trail. So I was like, this Camino stuff's going to be a piece of cake to him. What I found out was he had to break in his body the same way I broke my body in. And so I had already been hiking for a month, so I felt good. I had no problems. And all of a sudden, he was breaking his body in again, and he was having trouble, and he was struggling. And on day 2, he was really not doing well, and his morale was really low, just like mine was on day 2. And I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, oh my God. And I was just praying, like, what can I do to make this better? This is such an amazing trip for me. How am I going to make this amazing for him? But there's a saying that the Camino provides. And sure enough, there was this spray-painted sign, and it said, do you need horses? And I was like, yes! How did you know I needed horses? I didn't even know I needed horses. So I called the number, and there was a very nice English-speaking gentleman on the other line, and he said, walk a few hours and you'll find me. And I knew at this point, no names, no phone numbers, very easy, just start walking. And sure enough, we found him. He had these very well-trained, very well-taken care of horses, and they carried us up over the next mountain, which was just the break that my husband needed and just a special treat that I was looking for. So Camino markers. This is just a couple examples of the markers you'll see. Generally, it's just a yellow arrow painted on something, but they're pretty easy to find. Do not pay attention to the mileage. These both say 50 kilometers, and they were nowhere near each other. So day 38, I reached Santiago. So this is my trail family at the time. They are from all over the world, South Africa, the Netherlands, Canada, I forget the other one, New Zealand. But we celebrated the night before with sangria. And then the first thing you do in the morning when you get to Santiago is you got to take your picture in front of the famous Santiago de Compostela sign. And when you finally arrive, you are in front of the cathedral in Santiago de Compostela. Now at the time they were doing restorations, so there was scaffolding, but it's in a plaza, and there are 4 buildings with the cathedral on one side. And pilgrims are streaming in from all directions all the time, depending on what route they took. And you have to imagine, people hiked hundreds, if not thousands of miles to get to this one location, and they finally arrived. So this spot is a sea of celebration all year long. People party all year long. And when we got there, I was running into people that I met every single day on the Camino from the beginning to the end. It felt like everybody was there. And so you're celebrating, everybody's laughing, they're crying, they're hugging, they're kissing, and everybody's celebrating. They're gazing up at this cathedral that they hiked hundreds of miles to see, and they realize that they actually made it. And if that's not special enough, this guy here got down on his knee and proposed to his girlfriend. He carried a ring for 500 miles and never told anyone. It was amazing. So then you have to get your Compostela. This is a certificate of achievement. You get 2 of them. One is a certificate of mileage, and one of them, I forget what the other one is. I forget the other one. But you stand in line, and then you go in. And it was interesting because that was actually an American gentleman who welcomed me in. And he asked me when I got there, he said, "Where did you start?" And I said, "Saint Jean." And he wrote my official mileage, 775 kilometers. And then he asked me why I hiked the Camino. And I said, for religious and spiritual reasons, which really confused me and threw me off. Because if you had asked me that 6 weeks earlier, I would have said, oh, for the adventure of it. But the trip ended up being so much more than that to me. So then I got another certificate for that as well. So there's one final thing you have to see when you reach Santiago. This is something every pilgrim wants to see. There is something called barafumero. It is a massive 50-pound incense ball that they swing over the cathedral, inside of the cathedral. It takes about 8 monks to swing it, and this is a video of it. The story behind the barafumero is over 1,000 years ago, when pilgrims would hike into Santiago, they didn't have anywhere to sleep, so they would bed down in the cathedral. But they also didn't have modern-day conveniences of a shower every night, so they smelled really bad. So they would swing this barafumero over the cathedral to mask the smell. So now, today, every pilgrim wants to see this. However, they only swing it on Fridays. If you want to see it, you have to go on a Friday. Now, the Catholic Church knows that people hike into Santiago every single day. So they will tell you, for the low donation of 500 euros, we'll swing that baby any day of the week. But what they won't tell you is if a donation has already been made for the day. So sometimes they get multiple donations a day to see it swing. I had to go to Mass 3 times to finally see it.
Wow. Huh.
It is a really amazing thing to see after you've hiked 500 miles and you finally get there and you see this, and the nuns are singing the most beautiful music. Everybody records it, even though they tell you you're not allowed to. But I couldn't help but snicker because a lot of people think this is a really spiritual moment. I'm like, no, it was to cover stink. All right, so I do not have a good transition into the next slide, so I'm just going to jump in. This is something that you very rarely hear people talk about when they talk about having a life-changing experience or a long-distance hike. One of the most difficult parts of long-distance hiking and having a life-changing experience is transitioning back to the life you had before. And I bring this up not to scare you, but just to warn you that when you have an experience like this, you do not come back the same person. And a lot of people struggle with that because your family and your friends and all of your loved ones, they assume you're still the same person, but you're going to feel very different. And sometimes that can be alienating. So make sure you have a loving, supportive network. Make sure you understand that your expectations may be a little bit different when you come home. A lot of people call it hiker blues. Some people call it trail depression. People experience it in different ways. For me, physically, the sudden lack of physical activity was very difficult on me. Just like suddenly walking 20 miles a day is hard on your body, so is suddenly not walking 20 miles a day. I went from being outside in the sun all day, every day walking, to sitting at a desk 8 hours a day in a room with no windows. That was very, very hard on me, mentally and physically. Also, I missed that simple life. I went from having a very, very simple life to suddenly having to make decisions all day long, and none of them amounted to anything. And I went from asking myself, what inspires me? What's important to me? To saying, let's see, do I want the swordfish or the salmon for dinner? And I was like, what's the point? What is the point? So there are lots of things that you might experience when you come home. Take comfort in people who have been there. Take comfort in people who have done it. They will understand it. A lot of people contact me after the Camino and just ask if they can chat. And eventually, you will get past those things, and you will process the Camino in ways that you would never expect. I hiked the Camino 3 years ago, and I am just now starting to understand what it meant to me. Another thing, once you have an experience like this, you are always looking for what's next. You are always hungry for more. You always want to adventure more. So now I have had many adventures. I went and hiked about 100 miles of the Pacific Crest Trail. I've been to Australia numerous times. I went to Iceland to meet my trail family there, and I'm going back to the Camino to do the Portuguese route next year. A lot of pilgrims go back numerous times. So I have a lot of people to thank. First, my family and my friends. They never doubted me, and they were always excited for me. My husband, who inspires me every day and is the most awesome person in the entire world. I owe him a huge thank you. There is a nice couple named Nikki and Rick in a small trail town on the Appalachian Trail who told me there's this amazing thing called the Camino. And I went, yeah, never going to do it. I owe them a huge thank you. And then, of course, my trail family and all of my Camino angels along the way that helped me get there. I owe all of them a thank you. Like I said, I have a book about my experience, very honest, very raw, very open. It is available on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle or in print. I have a website, theresascamino.com. I highly recommend checking it out. I have tons of pictures and videos that I couldn't show tonight. I have a recording of this presentation. If you know someone who wants to see it, you can reach me through my website, and you can see where all of my additional talks are going to be. If you do enjoy my book, please, please, please leave a review on Amazon. Those little stars go a very long way for someone like me. And that is it. Thank you very much.
I just had a question. I mean, this sounds like an amazing experience, obviously. But had you done a lot of traveling before, like more conventional tourist kind of traveling?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. No, I had gone to Germany once when I was a kid with some people I knew. No, I hadn't traveled a lot. No, mostly in country.
And you think that this trip is different than like hiking the Pacific Crest Trail or the Appalachian, just because there's so many people that are there looking?
They're very different experiences. They're very different experiences. The terrain is different. The difficulty is different. You don't have to carry a tent or a ton of food on this trail. You meet people from all over the world on this trail, although people do come to the U.S. to hike our trails as well. It's just a very different experience in all ways.
Did you have a chance to talk about people who were cycling it? I've heard people walking it, but I've never heard of the cycling, and that's certainly a lot more manageable in terms of the time frame.
Yes.
My brother actually hiked it. It was so interesting. 2 years ago, he hiked the Appalachian Trail.
Mm-hmm.
He just came back from cycling across the country, and he's doing this next year when he hits 60. And so I'm already, I'm an art historian, so I'm planning the trips that I'll do in France to get there. And so I actually said, "Oh, you got to come and see." He said, "No," he said, "I don't want to hear someone else's experience."
Yeah.
Just what you said.
Yeah.
But his trail angels and the people he still gets together with from the Appalachian Trail are just incredible. But I was curious about the cyclists who were coming through.
Yes.
Did you ever talk with any of them?
I did not. So the bikers and the hikers, even though they stay in the same places, they tend to keep to themselves just because you develop cohorts along the way, and they're moving so fast. You see them for 5 minutes and then they're gone.
Okay.
So I didn't really have a chance to talk to any of the bikers.
How did you feel about the people who were cycling?
I thought it was really impressive.
Okay.
I don't know how they got up those hills.
Just like the ones who are on the tours, you know.
Yeah, no,
hey,
no.
is that really fair?
No, biking is very difficult. Biking
Yeah.
is, people think it's easier. It is not.
Yeah.
And you can tell when you look at their thighs.
Right. You need a
They're
road bike
working.
rather than, yeah.
Yeah, they're working
Okay.
hard.
How many people did you see on an average day like as you were hiking?
It depended on the day. When you get closer towards the end, you see dozens and dozens of people. But when I was walking through the Meseta, I could go all day and not see a single person. So it varied. It varied a lot. And depending on the Camino route that you take, you'll see more or less people. The Portuguese route is much quieter than the Camino Frances.
If you could only do 3 or 4 days of that stretch, what would you?
You know, I'm asked that question a lot, and I don't have an answer. I loved the Pyrenees Mountains. I loved Burgos. Galicia was beautiful, but what I would say is, in my honest opinion, I would not hike the last section. I did not enjoy that section. It was way too busy. It was very commercial. They had people selling T-shirts and postcards, and it was not the spiritual journey I had become accustomed to.
If you were in Madrid, what would you do? You train to a spot and then...
Yeah, Madrid's nowhere near the Camino, so you could take a train anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
How did you have trouble finding a place at night?
No, I did not. However, so there are only so many albergues, and you don't make reservations. So when you get into town, you have to find a bed. Well, I walk really slow, and I would walk all day. So by the time I got to town, I would get rejected from multiple albergues before I found a bed. They would say, completo, completo, which means full. But if you're concerned about that, you just stop earlier in the day. If I stopped at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd have my selection. I'd have my pick of beds. So yeah, towards the end, when it got busier, I was making reservations every night. I would call about ahead of time, and I would say, please reserve 1 bed for me for 8 hours. And then I would have a bed for the night, because those rooms did book up fast, because it was so busy. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very good. Are you going?
I'm still thinking about it. I'm really excited thinking about it. How about you?
No.
No? Not even a piece of it?
No. I physically couldn't do it, but it was very interesting.